The evening rush at Bellini's restaurant had just begun. The soft glow of chandeliers cast warm light over white tablecloths as the dinner crowd filed in. In the kitchen, Maya Rodriguez tied her apron strings a little tighter and took a deep breath. Friday nights were always the busiest, which meant better tips but also more pressure. She tucked a stray lock of dark hair behind her ear and grabbed her order pad. "Table 7 needs their drinks." "Maya," called out Pete, the bartender, sliding 2 martinis and a sparkling water onto her tray. "On it," Maya replied, balancing the tray with practiced ease as she pushed through the swinging doors into the dining area. As she served the drinks, Maya's eyes drifted to the corner table where her 8-year-old son Eli sat hunched over his math homework. His small face was scrunched in concentration, pencil moving slowly across the page. That corner table was a blessing. The owner, Mr. Bellini, had a soft spot for single parents and allowed Eli to sit there after school until Maya's shift ended at 9. Maya delivered the drinks with a warm smile that hid her exhaustion. She had been on her feet since the lunch shift started at 11 that morning. Her back ached and her ankles were swollen, but she wouldn't be done for another 4 hours. The double shifts were killing her, but the extra money was desperately needed. Between serving tables, Maya checked on Eli. He had finished his homework and was now drawing something on a piece of paper. As she approached, she saw it was another piano keyboard. Perfectly proportioned black and white keys sketched with careful attention to detail. "Hey, buddy," she said softly, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Did you finish your math?" Eli nodded, his eyes still on his drawing. "I got all the fractions right. Can I use your phone for a bit? I want to watch that piano lesson again." Maya glanced at the time. Her 15-minute break wasn't for another hour, but she could spare her phone until then. She slipped the old cracked device from her pocket and handed it to him. "Just until my break, okay? And keep the volume low." "Thanks, Mom." His face lit up as he took the phone, immediately opening YouTube to find the free piano lessons he'd been following for months. Maya watched him for a moment, her heart both full and heavy. Eli had shown an interest in music since he was 5, especially the piano. He would stop and stare whenever they passed music stores with instruments in the window. For his last birthday, she had saved up for a small electronic keyboard, but it broke after just 2 months. Since then, Eli had been teaching himself using paper keyboards and videos. A customer's wave caught Maya's attention, and she hurried back to work. As she took orders and cleared tables, her mind kept drifting to Eli's upcoming school talent show. He was desperate to participate but had nothing to perform with. The school had a piano, but students needed to demonstrate they knew how to play before they could use it for the show. Without a real instrument to practice on, Eli wouldn't get that chance. "Order up for table 12, called the kitchen staff, snapping Maya back to the present. Hours passed in a blur of orders, dishes, and friendly small talk with customers. Maya was good at her job, attentive without hovering, warm without being fake. Regular customers often requested her section, which helped with the tips she relied on to make ends meet. During her break, Maya sat with Eli while she gulped down a quick sandwich in the staff room. "Mom, look what I learned today," he said excitedly, placing his hands on the paper keyboard and moving his fingers in a pattern. "It's the beginning of Für Elise. Listen." He hummed the famous melody as his small fingers pressed the silent paper keys. "That's beautiful, sweetie," Maya said, amazed at how he could hear the music in his head. "You're getting really good." Eli's face grew serious. "But I need to practice on a real piano before the talent show auditions next month. Mr. Wilson won't let me use the school piano until he sees I can really play." Maya's stomach tightened. She had been dreading this conversation. "I know, buddy. I'm trying to figure something out." The truth was she had already tried everything she could think of. The community center's piano was always booked. The music store's practice rooms cost money they didn't have. Even the library's single piano had a 2-month waiting list. Maybe... Eli hesitated, his voice small. "Maybe I could try the piano here? Just once?" Maya glanced through the staff room doorway at the baby grand piano that sat near the bar. It was mostly for show. Occasionally on weekends, they hired a pianist to play soft background music, but it sat unused most evenings. "I don't know." "Eli, that piano is for customers and performers. Mr. Bellini might not like it." "I would be super careful," Eli promised, his eyes pleading. "Just for a few minutes. Please? Maya checked her watch. Her break was almost over and the dinner rush would be slowing down soon. Mr. Bellini was out tonight and the assistant manager, Rick, was generally more laid back. Let me think about it, okay? Maybe. And that's a big maybe. We can ask Rick later when things quiet down. Eli's face brightened with hope and Maya felt that familiar mix of love and heartache. She wanted so badly to give him everything he deserved. But their life had been a struggle since his father walked out 3 years ago. The child support checks were inconsistent at best, and Maya's salary barely covered their small one-bedroom apartment, food, and utilities. After her break, Maya returned to her tables with renewed energy. One table had a family with a girl about Eli's age who was chatting about her piano recital. Another had an older couple celebrating their anniversary. At the large corner table sat a group of business people in expensive suits, talking quietly but intensely about some deal. As the evening progressed, the restaurant grew quieter. Several tables emptied, and by 8:30 only a handful of customers remained. Maya noticed Eli watching the piano with longing in his eyes. She approached Rick, who was checking inventory behind the bar. "Hey, Rick," she said hesitantly. "I have a strange favor to ask." Rick looked up from his clipboard. "What's up, Maya?" "My son Eli. He's been teaching himself piano, but we don't have one at home. I was wondering if he could try the restaurant's piano for just 5 minutes. It would mean the world to him." Rick glanced at the nearly empty restaurant, then at Eli, who was watching them hopefully from his corner. "Well," Rick scratched his chin, "I guess it wouldn't hurt. Just keep it brief and tell him to play something soft, nothing crazy." Maya's face broke into a grateful smile. "Thank you so much. I promise it'll be quick." She walked back to Eli, her heart racing with excitement. "Guess what? Rick said you can try the piano for a few minutes, but you have to play something quiet, okay?" Eli's eyes widened. "Really, right now?" "Right now. But only for 5 minutes, and you need to be gentle with it." Eli nearly jumped out of his chair, carefully placing Maya's phone and his paper keyboard on the table. They walked together to the piano, which suddenly seemed enormous compared to Eli's small frame. The polished black surface gleamed under the restaurant lights, and Eli approached it with something close to reverence. Maya lifted him onto the bench, adjusting it so he could reach the keys comfortably. Eli placed his hands on the keyboard, closing his eyes for a moment as if to savor the feel of real piano keys beneath his fingers. "Remember what we agreed. Something soft and just for a few minutes," Maya whispered, suddenly aware of how quiet the restaurant had become. A few customers were watching with curious expressions. Eli nodded, took a deep breath, and pressed the first notes of Furelise. The sound was clear and beautiful, filling the restaurant with Beethoven's famous melody. His timing was slightly off and he missed a few notes, but for a child who had never played on a real piano before, it was remarkable. Maya stood beside him, her throat tight with emotion. This was the first time she'd actually heard him play anything, and the contrast between his paper keyboard practice and this real music brought tears to her eyes. She noticed some of the customers turning to watch, their conversations pausing. What Maya didn't notice was the man at the business table in the corner. He had stopped mid-sentence when the music began, his attention completely captured by the small boy at the piano and the waitress standing protectively beside him, her eyes shining with pride and unshed tears. The man set down his drink and watched intently as Eli played, his expression changing from surprise to something deeper, something that would change Maya and Eli's lives forever, though neither of them knew it yet. As Eli finished the piece, his final notes hanging in the air, Maya bent down to whisper in his ear, "That was beautiful, Eli. I'm so proud of you." She helped him off the bench, noticing his reluctance to leave the piano. "Can I play one more, Mom?" "Please," he whispered back. Maya glanced around nervously. Some customers were smiling, but she worried about taking advantage of Rick's kindness. "Not tonight, sweetie, but we'll figure something out for your practice. I promise." As they walked back to their corner table, Maya didn't realize that someone had been watching them with particular interest. Someone whose next action would leave the entire restaurant in shock and change their lives in ways she couldn't imagine. Daniel Mercer hadn't planned on dining at Bellini's that evening. The reservation had been a last-minute arrangement made by his assistant when another restaurant canceled on them. As the founder of Mercer Tech and one of the country's wealthiest entrepreneurs, Daniel was accustomed to doors opening for him, not closing. But he wasn't bothered by the change. Bellini's had excellent food, and more importantly, it offered the privacy he needed for this particular business meeting. "The numbers look promising," said Thomas, his chief investment officer, sliding a tablet across the table. "This music education software company has solid fundamentals, and their app is gaining traction in schools nationwide." Daniel nodded absently, his eyes scanning the projections on the screen. At 45, he had built his fortune by recognizing potential where others saw only risk. Technology that made education more accessible had always been his sweet spot, both professionally and personally. His charitable foundation focused heavily on bringing learning opportunities to underprivileged communities. "Their approach to teaching piano is particularly innovative," continued Vanessa, his head of strategy. "They've gamified the learning process so effectively that retention rates are nearly double the industry standard." Daniel was about to respond when the first notes of Beethoven's Für Elise drifted across the restaurant. He paused, his attention immediately drawn to the sound. It wasn't a recording. The timing was slightly uneven, and a few notes were missed. But there was something captivating about the performance. He turned in his seat and saw a small boy sitting at the restaurant's grand piano. A waitress, presumably the boy's mother based on their similar features, stood beside him, her expression a mixture of pride and nervousness. What struck Daniel most was how the child played with such focus, as if the restaurant around him had disappeared. "Daniel?" Thomas's voice brought him back to the table. "Sorry," Daniel said, his eyes still on the boy at the piano. "That child has talent." His dinner companions turned to look. The boy couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old, yet he was playing a classical piece from memory. It wasn't perfect, but the potential was unmistakable. "Cute kid," Vanessa commented before returning to her point about the investment opportunity. But Daniel wasn't listening anymore. He watched as the boy finished the piece and looked up at his mother with pure joy. The waitress, Maya, according to her name tag, bent down to whisper something in the boy's ear. Then she helped him off the bench, and they walked back to a corner table where school books were spread out. Something about the scene resonated with Daniel. Perhaps it was the memory of his own childhood, growing up with a single mother who had worked 2 jobs to support him. Or maybe it was the way the boy had played, with raw passion despite his obvious lack of formal training. "Excuse me for a moment," Daniel said, standing up from the table. His colleagues exchanged curious glances as he walked toward the restaurant manager, who was standing behind the bar. "Excuse me?" Daniel said to the manager, whose name tag read Rick. "That waitress and her son, the one who just played the piano, could you tell me a bit about them?" Rick looked surprised by the question. "Maya, she's one of our hardest workers. Been here about 3 years now. Her boy Eli usually sits in the corner and does his homework while she finishes her shift. First time I've ever seen him play the piano, though." "Does he take lessons?" Daniel asked. Rick chuckled. "Don't think so. Maya works double shifts most days just to make rent. From what I've heard, the kid teaches himself using YouTube videos and a paper keyboard he draws. Pretty incredible that he can play like that without a real piano to practice on." Daniel thanked the manager and returned to his table, his mind working. The business conversation resumed, but he found himself glancing occasionally at the corner where Eli had returned to drawing on paper, while his mother served nearby tables. As the meeting wound down and dessert was served, Daniel noticed that the restaurant had emptied considerably. Maya was cleaning a table not far from them, and he could see the fatigue in her movements. "I think we've covered everything for tonight," Daniel said to his team. "Why don't you all head out? I'll take care of the bill." After his colleagues left, Daniel remained at the table, sipping his coffee. He watched as Maya approached him with the check. "Was everything to your satisfaction, sir?" she asked with a professional smile that didn't quite mask her exhaustion. "Everything was excellent," Daniel replied. "Your son plays beautifully." Maya's professional demeanor softened, her eyes lighting up at the mention of Eli. "Thank you. He loves music so much. That was actually his first time playing on a real piano." "Really?" Daniel said, though he already knew this from Rick. "He has a natural talent." Maya glanced over at Eli, who was now watching them curiously from his corner table. He practices every day on paper keyboards he draws, saves all my tip money to buy a real one someday. She gave a small laugh. Sorry, I don't usually talk about personal things with customers. No need to apologize, Daniel said. Music education is actually something I'm passionate about. He hesitated, then made a decision. Would you mind if I spoke with him for a moment? Maya looked surprised but nodded. Of course, let me get him. She walked over to Eli and spoke quietly to him. The boy looked over at Daniel with wide eyes, then followed his mother back to the table. Eli, this gentleman wanted to meet you, Maya said, placing a protective hand on her son's shoulder. Hi, Eli, Daniel said, extending his hand. My name is Daniel. I heard you playing the piano earlier. You're very good. Eli shook Daniel's hand solemnly. Thank you, sir. I made some mistakes, though. Everyone makes mistakes, especially when learning something new, Daniel replied. How long have you been playing? I don't really play for real, Eli admitted. I just practice on paper and watch videos, but I'm saving up for a keyboard. He reached into his pocket and proudly produced a small Ziploc bag containing a few dollar bills and some coins. I have $12.37 so far. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. The determination in this child's eyes reminded him so much of himself at that age. The hunger to learn, the drive to overcome obstacles. That's impressive commitment, Daniel said. What made you interested in piano? Eli's face lit up. We went on a school trip to the symphony last year, and I saw this lady playing the piano so fast her hands were like a blur. But even when she played super fast, it sounded so beautiful. I decided right then I wanted to learn. Maya smiled at her son's enthusiasm, but glanced at her watch. Eli, I need to finish cleaning my tables. We'll be leaving in about 20 minutes. Actually, Daniel said, reaching for his wallet, I'd like to make a proposal if that's all right with you. Maya's smile faltered slightly, her posture becoming more guarded. What kind of proposal? Daniel pulled out a business card and handed it to her. My name is Daniel Mercer. I run a technology company, but I also have a foundation that supports arts education for children. Maya looked at the card, her eyes widening slightly as recognition dawned. Even someone who didn't follow business news would likely have heard the name. Eli has genuine talent, Daniel continued. I'd like to help him develop it. My foundation could provide him with a scholarship for proper piano lessons and a good instrument to practice on. Maya's hand tightened on Eli's shoulder. That's very generous, Mr. Mercer. But why would you do that for us? You don't even know us. It was a fair question. Daniel considered how to answer without sounding condescending. When I was about Eli's age, he began, my mother worked as a housekeeper for a family with a home library. I loved books, but we couldn't afford many. The family noticed my interest and gave me free access to their collection. That simple act of kindness changed the course of my life. He looked at Eli. Sometimes all a child needs is access to the right tools. Eli clearly has the passion and discipline. He just needs the opportunity. Maya bit her lip, conflicting emotions playing across her face. It's a lot to take in, and I'm not comfortable accepting such a large gift from a stranger, no matter who you are. I understand completely, Daniel said. The offer doesn't have to be decided tonight. Take my card, think about it. My foundation has a formal application process, so everything would be official and transparent. Rick approached their table. Maya, there's a spill at table 9 when you get a chance. I'll be right there, she said, then turned back to Daniel. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Mercer. I'll think about it. As Maya walked away, Eli remained standing by the table, clutching his small bag of savings. Sir, he said hesitantly, if I did get piano lessons, do you think I could play in a real concert someday? Daniel smiled at the boy's ambition. With hard work and practice, absolutely. But you know what? Even without lessons, you already did something amazing tonight. You played from your heart, and that's what music is really about. Eli nodded solemnly as if absorbing this wisdom. I should go back to my table now. Mom doesn't like me bothering customers. You're not bothering me at all, Daniel assured him. But yes, you should help your mom. It was nice meeting you, Eli. As the boy walked away, Daniel finished his coffee, his mind made up. Regardless of whether Maya accepted his formal offer, he wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. There was something special about that boy, a raw talent and determination that resonated with him deeply. He paid his bill, leaving a tip that was substantial without being embarrassingly large. As he stood to leave, he glanced over at Maya, who was wiping down a table while keeping an eye on Eli. Their lives were about to change. They just didn't know it yet. The following Friday evening found Bellini's restaurant busier than usual. Word had somehow spread about the little boy who had played the piano the week before, and several regular customers had requested tables near the baby grand, hoping for a repeat performance. Maya noticed the increased attention as she moved between tables, balancing plates and refilling water glasses. She felt a mix of pride and uneasiness about the sudden interest in her son. Eli sat at his usual corner table, but tonight he seemed distracted, his eyes constantly drifting toward the piano. "Mom," he whispered when she stopped by his table during a brief lull, "do you think Mr. Rick would let me play again tonight?" Maya tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a habit when she was thinking. "I don't know, honey. It's really busy and I don't want to bother him." Eli's face fell slightly, but he nodded. "I understand. I brought my paper keyboard anyway." He pulled out several sheets of paper taped together with hand-drawn piano keys. Maya's heart squeezed at the sight. "Tell you what," she said, making a quick decision. "When it quiets down later, I'll ask him. But no promises, okay?" Eli's smile returned. "Okay. I've been practicing a new song, too." As Maya returned to her duties, her hand brushed against the business card in her apron pocket. Daniel Mercer's card. She had looked him up after their encounter last week, and had been shocked to discover just how wealthy and influential he actually was. His foundation had funded music programs in dozens of schools across the country, and his personal story, rising from poverty to become a tech billionaire, was well documented. She had thought about calling the number on the card several times but always stopped herself. Pride, suspicion, and a lifetime of learning that nothing came without strings attached held her back. What would someone like him really want in return? The cynical part of her couldn't help but wonder. Yet when she looked at Eli practicing silently on his paper keys, his face screwed up in concentration, she wondered if her pride was standing in the way of her son's future. "Order up, Maya," called the kitchen staff, snapping her back to the present. The evening progressed quickly, the restaurant staying packed well past the usual dinner rush. Maya was just delivering dessert to a couple celebrating their anniversary when she noticed a familiar face entering the restaurant. Daniel Mercer, dressed in a casual button-down shirt rather than the business suit he'd worn last time, was speaking with the hostess. Maya's pulse quickened. Was he here because of Eli? Had he expected her to call? The hostess led him to a small table in her section, and Maya took a deep breath before approaching. "Good evening, Mr. Mercer," she said, trying to keep her voice professional. "Welcome back to Bellini's." Daniel looked up with a warm smile. "Hello, Maya. I was hoping you'd be working tonight. Can I get you something to drink while you look at the menu?" she asked, maintaining her professional demeanor. "Just sparkling water for now, thank you." His eyes moved past her to the corner where Eli sat. "How's the young pianist doing tonight?" "He's good," Maya replied, her posture softening slightly. "He's been hoping to play again, actually." "I'd love to hear him," Daniel said. "I brought something that might interest him, if that's all right with you." Maya noticed a slim leather case beside his chair. "What is it?" "Sheet music," Daniel explained. "Some beginner pieces that might suit his level. I thought he might enjoy having something new to learn." Maya was touched by the thoughtful gesture. It wasn't an expensive gift or a grand promise, just some sheet music that showed he had been thinking about Eli's interest. "That's very kind of you. I'm sure he'd be thrilled." She hesitated, then added, "I've been meaning to call you about your offer, but I wanted to think it through carefully." "Of course," Daniel nodded. "There's no rush. These decisions shouldn't be made lightly." As Maya went to get his water, she noticed that the restaurant had begun to empty. The night rush was finally winding down. When she returned to Daniel's table, she found him studying the menu. "Mr. Mercer," she began, setting down his water, "would you mind if I brought Eli over to meet you properly? He's been talking about your conversation all week." "I'd be delighted," Daniel replied. Maya walked over to Eli's corner, bending down beside him. "Remember the kind man from last week?" "Mr. Mercer?" He's here again and brought something for you. Would you like to say hello? Eli's eyes widened. Really, for me? He quickly gathered his papers, carefully folding his drawn keyboard. Maya led him to Daniel's table, where the businessman stood to greet them. Hello again, Eli, Daniel said, extending his hand. It's good to see you. Eli shook his hand solemnly. Good evening, sir. Thank you for coming back. Daniel smiled at the boy's formal greeting. I brought something you might find useful. He reached for the leather case and unzipped it, pulling out several booklets of sheet music. These are piano pieces for beginners. I thought you might like to try some new music. Eli's eyes grew round as Daniel placed the booklets in his hands. He opened the top one reverently, running his fingers over the notes printed on the page. Can you read music? Daniel asked gently. Eli nodded. A little. I learned from YouTube. This one is Moonlight Sonata. His finger traced the familiar melody line on the page. It is, Daniel confirmed, clearly impressed. That's actually a bit advanced, but there are simpler pieces in there too. Maya watched the interaction with a lump in her throat. Eli was beaming in a way she hadn't seen in months. Maya, Rick called from across the restaurant. Table 4 needs their check when you get a chance. I need to get back to work, Maya said apologetically. Can Eli stay here for a bit? Daniel asked. I'd be happy to show him a few things about reading these pieces. Maya hesitated, her protective instincts kicking in. But Eli was looking up at her with pleading eyes, clutching the sheet music to his chest. Just for a few minutes, she agreed. Eli, be polite and don't take up too much of Mr. Mercer's time. As Maya returned to her duties, she kept glancing over at their table. Daniel had pulled his chair around to sit beside Eli, and they were bent over the sheet music together. She could see Daniel pointing to different notations while Eli nodded attentively. By the time she returned 15 minutes later, the restaurant had emptied considerably. Only a few tables were still occupied, mostly by people lingering over coffee and dessert. Mr. Mercer has been teaching me about dynamics, Eli announced excitedly when she approached. That means how loud or soft to play the notes. That sounds fascinating, Maya said, smiling at her son's enthusiasm. But I think we've taken up enough of Mr. Mercer's time. Actually, Daniel said, I was wondering if Eli might like to try one of these pieces on the piano. The restaurant is quiet now, and I've already spoken to Rick. He said it would be fine. Eli looked up at Maya with such hope in his eyes that she couldn't bring herself to say no. All right, but just one short piece. The three of them walked over to the grand piano, and Eli climbed onto the bench with Daniel's help. He placed one of the simpler pieces of sheet music on the stand, a beginner's arrangement of Ode to Joy. I've been practicing this one on my paper, Eli confessed, positioning his fingers over the keys. The first notes were hesitant, as Eli adjusted to the feel of real piano keys again. But soon he found his rhythm, playing the simple melody with growing confidence. The few remaining diners turned to watch, their conversations falling quiet. What happened next surprised everyone, including Maya. As Eli reached the middle of the piece, he began to embellish the simple melody, adding harmonies that weren't written on the page. His small hands moved across the keyboard with increasing assurance, transforming the beginner's piece into something more complex and beautiful. Daniel's eyebrows rose in astonishment. He glanced at Maya, who stood with her hand pressed to her mouth, equally amazed. This wasn't just a child who had taught himself a few songs. This was a child with genuine musical intuition, the rare ability to hear and create harmony instinctively. When Eli finished playing, there was a moment of silence before the restaurant erupted in applause. Eli looked up, startled, as if he'd forgotten there was an audience. A shy smile spread across his face as he realized the applause was for him. That was incredible, Eli, Daniel said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. Did you create those extra parts yourself? Eli nodded. I just hear how it should sound in my head. Is that okay? Okay? It's more than okay. It's extraordinary, Daniel replied. He turned to Maya, who was wiping tears from her eyes. Your son has a gift. A real gift. One of the diners approached the piano, an elderly man with silver hair. Young man, he said to Eli. I taught music for 40 years, and I've rarely heard a child your age play with such natural musicality. Are you taking lessons? Before Eli could answer, another customer joined them. That was beautiful, sweetheart. Do you perform anywhere else? Soon a small crowd had gathered around the piano. all expressing their amazement at Eli's playing. Maya watched with a mixture of pride and overwhelm as her son answered their questions politely, his eyes shining with joy. Daniel stood slightly apart, observing the scene with thoughtful eyes. When the crowd finally dispersed and Eli returned to his mother's side, Daniel approached them both. "Maya," he said quietly, "I hope you'll reconsider my offer. Talent like Eli's is rare. It deserves to be nurtured." Maya looked down at her son, who was still clutching the sheet music to his chest, his face glowing with happiness. In that moment, she made her decision. "Mr. Mercer, could we meet sometime this week to discuss your foundation's program? I think it might be the right thing for Eli." Daniel's face broke into a warm smile. "Absolutely. And please call me Daniel." As they exchanged contact information, neither of them noticed Mr. Bellini himself standing in the doorway of the restaurant. Having arrived just in time to witness Eli's performance, the restaurant owner watched the three of them with interest, an idea forming in his mind that would soon add another unexpected twist to their story. 2 days after Eli's second piano performance at Bellini's, Maya sat across from Daniel at a small cafe near her apartment. She had just finished her morning shift and had a few hours before she needed to pick up Eli from school. She nervously stirred her coffee, trying to process everything Daniel was explaining about his foundation's music program. So the scholarship would cover weekly lessons with Professor Chen for a full year, Daniel explained, sliding a brochure across the table. "She's one of the best piano teachers in the city, especially for gifted children." Maya glanced at the brochure, which showed smiling children playing various instruments. "And the foundation does this for how many kids?" "Currently, we support about 50 children across the country," Daniel replied. "Most come from backgrounds where access to music education would otherwise be impossible." Maya nodded slowly, still not entirely comfortable with accepting such generosity. "And what about the instrument? Lessons won't help much if he can't practice at home." Daniel smiled. "That's covered too. We provide either a quality digital piano or access to practice rooms, depending on the family's living situation." He paused, watching her expression carefully. "I understand your hesitation, Maya. It feels like a lot to accept from a stranger." "It does," she admitted. "I've spent 8 years teaching Eli that we make our own way, that we don't depend on handouts." She looked down at her coffee. "But I've also taught him to work hard for his dreams, and I don't want to be the one standing in his way because of my pride." "It's not a handout," Daniel said gently. "It's an investment in talent. My foundation exists because I believe every child deserves the chance to develop their gifts, regardless of their financial circumstances." Before Maya could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and frowned. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked. "It's Mr. Bellini, my boss," she said, sounding confused. "He wants me to come in early tonight and bring Eli. Says he has something important to discuss. Is that unusual?" "Very. Mr. Bellini rarely comes in on weekdays, and he's never asked to meet with Eli before." She looked up, worry crossing her face. "I hope there's not a problem with Eli playing the piano. Some customers might have complained about the disruption." Daniel shook his head. "From what I saw, the customers loved it. Many stayed longer just to listen. Still, a restaurant isn't a concert hall." Maya sighed. "I should probably get going. I need to pick up Eli and get ready for whatever this meeting is about." "Of course," Daniel said, gathering the paperwork. "Take these materials home, look them over. There's no deadline. The offer stands whenever you're ready." As they stood to leave, Maya hesitated, then extended her hand. "Thank you, Daniel. Regardless of what we decide, your kindness means a lot." Daniel shook her hand warmly. "Just promise you'll think about it? That boy has something special." "I know," Maya said softly. "Believe me, I know." That evening, Maya and Eli arrived at Bellini's an hour before her shift was scheduled to start. Eli clutched his folder of sheet music, the gift from Daniel, as they walked through the front door. The restaurant was in the quiet lull between lunch and dinner, with only a few tables occupied. Mr. Bellini said to go straight to his office, Maya told Eli, trying to hide her nervousness. "Remember to be polite, okay?" "I will, Mom," Eli promised, sensing her tension. "Is Mr. Bellini mad about me playing the piano?" "I don't think so, honey," Maya said, though she wasn't entirely convinced herself. "Let's find out what he wants." They made their way to the small office at the back of the restaurant. Maya knocked on the door and a gruff voice called for them to enter. Inside, they found Mr. Bellini seated behind a cluttered desk. He was a robust man in his 60s with a thick mustache and hands that spoke of years in the kitchen before he became the owner. To Maya's surprise, Rick was also there, along with an older woman Maya didn't recognize. The woman sat primly in a chair by the window, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Ah, Maya, Eli, come in, Mr. Bellini said, rising from his chair. "Thank you for coming early. Please sit down." Maya and Eli took the two remaining chairs facing the desk. Eli held tightly to his sheet music, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "First," Mr. Bellini began, "I want to say that no one is in trouble." He smiled at Eli, who visibly relaxed. Quite the opposite, in fact. "I came in last Friday night just as you were finishing your piano performance, young man." "I'm sorry if it disturbed the customers," Eli said quickly. Mr. Bellini laughed, a hearty sound that filled the small office. "Disturbed? Boy, we had 3 tables leave bigger tips than usual because they enjoyed your playing so much. One couple even asked if you would be performing again this weekend." Maya blinked in surprise. "Really?" "Really?" Rick confirmed with a nod. "We've had several calls asking if the piano boy will be playing again." Mr. Bellini leaned forward, his expression growing more serious. "Which brings me to why I called you here. Maya, I've always appreciated your hard work, and I know things haven't been easy for you and Eli." Maya tensed, unsure where this was heading. "I also know," he continued, "that a certain wealthy customer has taken an interest in Eli's musical education." Maya's eyebrows shot up. "How did you—" "This is a restaurant, my dear. People talk. Waiters hear things." Mr. Bellini waved his hand dismissively. "What matters is this. I have a proposition that might benefit all of us." He gestured to the older woman. "This is Mrs. Abernathy. For 20 years, she taught piano at the conservatory before retiring. She's also my sister-in-law." Mrs. Abernathy nodded politely at Maya and gave Eli a warm smile. "My proposition is this," Mr. Bellini continued. "Bellini's will host a piano night every Friday. Eli will play for 1 hour, simple pieces, nothing too demanding, and in return he'll receive a small payment plus tips from the customers. Additionally, Mrs. Abernathy has agreed to give him a lesson after each performance right here at the restaurant." Maya's mouth fell open in shock. This was the last thing she had expected. "Furthermore," Mr. Bellini added, "we'll adjust your Friday schedule so you can be off during Eli's performance time. We'll promote the event in the local paper and on our website. I believe it will bring in customers who might not otherwise dine with us." I don't know what to say," Maya stammered. "This is incredibly generous." Mr. Bellini shrugged. "It's good business. Restaurants need something special to stand out these days. But," he looked at Eli, "it's also because I recognize talent when I see it. My father was a musician in the old country. Never had the chances this boy deserves." Eli, who had been quiet until now, looked up. "Does this mean I can play the piano every week?" "If you want to, yes," Mr. Bellini replied. "And get real lessons?" Eli's voice was filled with disbelief and hope. Mrs. Abernathy spoke for the first time, her voice gentle but authoritative. "I heard about your playing from my brother-in-law. If you're willing to work hard, I would be honored to teach you." Eli looked at his mother, his eyes pleading. "Mom, can I do it? Please?" Maya felt overwhelmed. Between Daniel's scholarship offer and now this opportunity at the restaurant, doors were suddenly opening for Eli that she never could have imagined. It was almost too much to process. "Can we have a moment to discuss it?" she asked. "Of course," Mr. Bellini said, standing. "Take all the time you need. We'll wait outside." When the 3 adults had left the office, Maya turned to her son. "Eli, this is a big commitment. Playing in front of people every week, taking lessons, it would be like having a job on top of school." "I know," Eli said solemnly, "but Mom, it's what I want more than anything. And we could use the money, right?" Maya's heart tightened at his words. Even at 8, Eli was always thinking about their financial struggles. "The money would help," she admitted. "But that's not the most important thing. What matters is whether this is truly what you want." "It is," Eli said without hesitation. "And maybe we could still do Mr. Mercer's program too." "For the piano at home?" Maya considered this. Having both opportunities would give Eli the best chance to develop his talent. Mrs. Abernathy's weekly lessons at the restaurant, plus the more comprehensive program through Daniel's foundation. Let's take one step at a time, she said finally. We'll accept Mr. Bellini's offer and then we'll talk more about Mr. Mercer's scholarship, okay? Eli nodded eagerly, and Maya called the others back into the office. We accept, she told Mr. Bellini, and we're very grateful for the opportunity. Excellent. Mr. Bellini clapped his hands together. We'll start this Friday. Now, young man, do you have any pieces prepared that you could play? Eli held up his folder of sheet music. Mr. Mercer gave me these beginner pieces. I've been practicing them on my paper keyboard. Mrs. Abernathy raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Paper keyboard? He draws piano keys on paper and practices on them, Maya explained, a hint of embarrassment in her voice. To her surprise, Mrs. Abernathy looked impressed rather than pitying. That shows real dedication. Many great pianists practice that way when they couldn't access instruments. She turned to Eli. Would you show me what you've been working on? The dining room is empty now, so we can use the piano. As they all moved to the main restaurant, Maya sent a quick text to Daniel. You won't believe what just happened. Eli's going to be performing at Bellini's every Friday night with piano lessons included. Thank you for starting all this. The response came almost immediately. That's wonderful news. I'll be there this Friday to see his debut. The scholarship offer still stands for the home piano and additional training. He deserves every opportunity. Maya watched as Eli sat at the grand piano with Mrs. Abernathy beside him. As he began to play one of the beginner pieces, the older woman nodded approvingly, occasionally correcting his hand position or suggesting a different tempo. For the first time in years, Maya felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. Not just the desperate hope that had kept her going through the hardest times, but a bright, expansive hope that saw a future full of possibilities for her son. Mr. Bellini came to stand beside her. You've raised a special boy, he said quietly. Yes, Maya agreed, blinking back tears as she watched Eli's face light up when he mastered a difficult passage under Mrs. Abernathy's guidance. Yes, I have. What neither of them knew was that Daniel Mercer had something even more extraordinary planned for Eli's first official performance, something that would shock not just the restaurant patrons but the entire city. 3 years had passed since that fateful night when Eli first played the piano at Bellini's restaurant. On this warm Sunday afternoon, a much different scene was unfolding at the city's prestigious concert hall. Behind the heavy velvet curtains, 11-year-old Eli adjusted his bow tie, his fingers moving restlessly as if playing invisible keys. He had performed many times over the past 3 years, at Bellini's, at school recitals, even at a few local community events. But today was different. Today was his first solo recital at an actual concert hall, with a program of classical pieces that would have challenged pianists twice his age. 5 minutes, Eli called the stage manager, a kind woman with a clipboard and headset. Maya stood nearby, watching her son with a mixture of pride and amazement. Sometimes she could hardly believe how much their lives had changed. She smoothed down her new dress, something she would never have been able to afford in their previous life, and thought about the journey that had brought them here. After that first official piano night at Bellini's 3 years ago, things had snowballed in ways neither she nor Eli could have imagined. Daniel Mercer had indeed attended, as promised, but he hadn't come alone. He'd brought the dean of the city's music conservatory, 2 music journalists, and several patrons of the arts. By the end of Eli's hour-long performance, the restaurant had been packed, with people even standing by the door just to listen. The next day, Eli's picture had appeared in the local newspaper under the headline, Restaurant Discovers Piano Prodigy. The article had mentioned Daniel's foundation and its mission to find untapped talent in unlikely places. Suddenly, Bellini's piano nights became the hottest reservation in town. Within a month, Maya had accepted Daniel's scholarship offer. The foundation had provided not only a high-quality piano for their apartment, but also comprehensive music education for Eli, theory classes, composition lessons, and training with some of the best teachers in the country. Maya no longer worked double shifts at Bellini's. Instead, she now managed Daniel's foundation's day-to-day operations, helping to identify other talented children who lacked opportunities. It was fulfilling work that paid well enough for her to finish her own education. She was now halfway through a degree in nonprofit management. You nervous? She asked Eli, brushing an imaginary speck of dust from his shoulder. He looked up at her with the same serious eyes he'd always had, though now they held a confidence that came from years of hard work and achievement. A little, he admitted. But Mrs. Abernathy says nerves just mean you care about doing well. Maya smiled at the mention of the piano teacher. Mrs. Abernathy had remained Eli's first teacher and most steadfast supporter, even as he advanced to more specialized instruction. The older woman was sitting in the front row tonight, alongside Mr. Bellini and several of the Bellini's wait staff who had watched Eli grow up. "You're going to be amazing," Maya assured him. "Just play like you always do, from your heart." A knock at the door interrupted them. Daniel entered, dressed in a sharp suit, his face lighting up when he saw Eli. "There's our star pianist," he said warmly. "How are you feeling, Eli?" "Ready?" Eli said, standing a little straighter. Daniel nodded approvingly. "I wanted to let you know the hall is full. We even had to add some extra seats." Maya's eyes widened. "Really? That many people came?" "Your son has fans," Daniel said with a smile. "But that's not all I came to tell you." He turned to Eli. "The director of the National Youth Orchestra is in the audience. He's very interested in meeting you after the performance." Eli's eyes grew huge. "The National Youth Orchestra? But they only take teenagers." "They make exceptions for exceptional talent," Daniel replied. "No pressure, of course. Just play your best, like always." As Daniel turned to leave, he paused beside Maya. "You should be very proud," he said quietly.
"Not just of his talent, but of the person he's becoming."
"That's all you." Maya felt her throat tighten with emotion. "It's been a team effort," she said. "I can never thank you enough for what you've done for us." Daniel shook his head. "I just opened a door. Eli walked through it on his own strength, and you've been beside him every step of the way." He checked his watch. "I should get to my seat." "Good luck, Eli." After Daniel left, Maya knelt in front of her son, straightening his already perfect tie. "Remember when you used to practice on paper keyboards?" she asked softly. Eli nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "I kept them all. They're in a box under my bed." "You've come so far," Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. "But you're still my same Eli who drew piano keys and hummed Beethoven while doing math homework." 2 minutes, called the stage manager. Maya stood and took a deep breath. "I'll be right in the front row. Just focus on the music, not the audience." "I know, Mom," Eli said with the slight impatience of a child who has heard the same advice many times. Then his expression softened. "Thank you. For everything." Maya kissed his forehead and moved to the side of the stage where she could watch without being seen by the audience. The heavy velvet curtain rose, revealing the grand piano in the center of the stage, gleaming under the spotlight. The audience applauded as Eli walked confidently to the piano, bowed as Mrs. Abernathy had taught him, and took his seat. For a moment he sat motionless, his hands hovering above the keys. Then he began to play. The piece was Mozart's Piano Sonata No. 16, and from the first notes it was clear that this was no ordinary child performer. Eli played with a maturity and emotional depth that belied his 11 years. His small hands moved across the keyboard with precision and grace, bringing out nuances in the music that many adult pianists missed. Maya watched, transfixed, as her son lost himself in the music. This was why they had accepted help, why they had taken chances, why they had allowed their lives to be transformed, not for fame or money, but for this, for the pure joy on Eli's face as his fingers danced across the keys, creating beauty that touched everyone who heard it. As the first piece ended, the audience erupted in applause. Eli acknowledged it with a small bow from his seat before beginning his second piece, a more challenging Chopin nocturne that he had mastered only recently. In the front row, Maya could see Daniel beaming with pride, Mrs. Abernathy dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, and Mr. Bellini applauding enthusiastically. Behind them sat dozens of people whose lives had been touched by Eli's story. Customers from the restaurant, teachers from his school, other children from the Foundation's programs, and music lovers who had read about the boy who went from paper keyboards to concert halls. The recital continued, each piece more challenging than the last, culminating in Eli's own composition, a piece he had written about his journey from that first night at Bellini's to the concert stage. It wove themes of struggle, hope, and gratitude into a moving musical narrative that left many in the audience wiping away tears. When the final note faded, there was a moment of awed silence before the hall erupted in a standing ovation. People rose to their feet, applauding and cheering as Eli stood and bowed deeply, his face flushed with exhilaration. After taking several bows, Eli did something unexpected. He walked to the edge of the stage and extended his hand toward Maya, inviting her to join him. Surprised, she shook her head, but the audience's applause grew louder and Daniel gently nudged her forward. With nervous steps, Maya climbed the small stairs to the stage and stood beside her son. Eli took her hand and they bowed together, the audience's applause washing over them. In that moment, it wasn't just Eli they were celebrating, but the journey they had taken together, mother and son against the odds. As they left the stage, Eli was immediately surrounded by well-wishers, including the director of the National Youth Orchestra, who was already discussing potential opportunities. Maya stepped back, giving her son space to have his moment. Daniel came to stand beside her. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I first saw Eli play at Bellini's, I thought I was helping him. But watching how this has all unfolded, how many lives have been touched through your story, I realize now that he was actually helping me." Maya looked at him curiously. "How so?" "I've funded music programs for years," Daniel explained. "But I was always removed from the actual impact. Spreadsheets, reports, numbers. Through Eli and through you, I've seen firsthand how music can transform not just one life but an entire community." He gestured to the crowded reception area, where people from all walks of life were mingling. Wealthy patrons of the arts alongside waiters from Bellini's, music professors chatting with parents of other scholarship students from the foundation. "Because of what started that night with Eli at the piano, we've now identified and supported over 200 talented children across the country," Daniel continued. "The foundation has expanded its programs to include all the arts, not just music. And next year we're opening a dedicated arts center in the neighborhood where you and Eli used to live." Maya's eyes widened. "I didn't know about that part," Daniel smiled. "The board just approved it yesterday. And we want to name it after Eli, the boy who started it all." Maya felt tears welling in her eyes. "He would be so honored. We both are." Across the room, Eli caught her eye and waved excitedly, beckoning her to join him and the orchestra director. As she made her way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and kind words from strangers who had been moved by her son's music, Maya reflected on how life could change in an instant. One moment, you're a waitress lifting your son to a piano he's never played before. The next, you're watching that same child's talent touch hearts and change lives, all because someone took the time to notice, to care, and to act. The greatest gift hadn't been the scholarship or the opportunities, though those had been life-changing. The greatest gift had been the belief from Daniel, from Mrs. Abernathy, from Mr. Bellini, and from countless others, that Eli's talent mattered, that it deserved to be nurtured, that it could make a difference in the world. And it had. It truly had.